So this talk explores the question of whether democratic economic planning has its own political aesthetics and argues that at present it does not, and, and that this absence poses a problem, even for those with little interest in art or aesthetics. By examining how political projects rely on images, symbols, and forms of representation, the talk highlights why aesthetics matter for making democratic economic planning imaginable, communicable, and compelling. Building on his 2023 exhibition, Art, Design, and Aesthetics of Democratic Economic Planning, Eric will engage broader questions of utopian political aesthetics and their strategic significance. It takes stock of existing aesthetic experiments and related to democratic economic planning and raises methodological questions about how such aesthetics might be approached and aims to provoke further experimentation rather than prescribe a unified visual or cultural language. So perhaps you're already familiar with Eric Meier, but Eric Meier is an organizer, artist, and curator working on democratic economic planning, critical theory, and digital culture. He co-founded INDEP, where he now works as a strategic network facilitator. But also as an artist, his practice explores the topics of contemporary internet culture, distorted desire, and utopian imagination through digital image and video collage. His artistic presence has been presented in the before mentioned 2023 exhibition, and as well as the Science Fiction Film Festival in 2024 in Berlin, and the 2025 exhibition Das Private ist politisch in Bonn. His work has also appeared in publications by Rhizomatica, Reincantamento, Conjure Utopia, the Institute of Network Cultures, and Rabble Review. So, Eric, if you are ready, you may start your presentation.
Yes, thank you. Can everybody see that? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, welcome everyone. I'm gonna have to deal with like the double desktop setup, but I think I'm looking somewhat into the camera. Um, Welcome to my talk, The Political Aesthetics of Democratic Economic Planning. Um, I realize that some of the statements in the event description are a little bit outdated, that I still changed the in like last minute the presentation, but we're gonna get to the fundamental points nevertheless. Um, yeah, a super short preliminary thing about like myself and like about the approach to this presentation. Um, that's gonna be I have no formal background in like arts education, be that art theory or art history, and I never identified as someone like who was interested in like art, like up until a few years ago. Um, where I grew up, art and even official culture events are basically for rich old people. Um, yeah, but ever since my youth, I was drawn towards what you might call aesthetics. Um, and so I want to say like, okay, hey, this is not gonna be like super like from like a super artistic background. Yeah. And when I found my access to like art proper, you might say a couple of years ago, um, I very quickly wanted to relate it to this democratic economic planning discourse, and that I ended up doing an exhibition um, that didn't just host my own art pieces, but like I organized it and I curated it, and there were other people involved. Um, and this talk will also not be based on theory, be that art theory or political theory, but on what I would call heuristics. So basically, I would say theory and concepts are tools that should enable us to reach our goals. Um, and for that, they only have to be sufficient, not perfect. And we shouldn't do endless academic discourse for its own sake, but we should really focus in our concepts and in our theory, like what matters for reaching our goal. And you will see how that, yeah, how that goes through the talk. Really quickly, this is the poster for my 2023 exhibition, Kunst, Design, Ästhetik, demokratische Wirtschaftsplanung. In English, Art, Design, Aesthetics of Democratic Economic Planning. You might already see, okay, that's maybe not the first aesthetical association you might have with that topic. Yeah, well, let's start. Um, a couple of preliminary words for every. I had no idea who would come to this talk, like how far it would reach. Um, if people are already familiar with the concept of democratic economic planning, but just really quickly, basically it means okay, hey, important decision over production, reproduction, consumption, distribution, and investment, and like our lives in general should be made and determined consciously and collectively rather than through through democratic processes rather than A, either by state authorities or B, through market forces. Um, yeah, so like neither the USSR nor capitalism. Then, what is political aesthetics? I don't have like a proper, super precise definition of it. I would simply say, okay, and here you say, okay, is the what I'm saying good enough? It doesn't have to be perfect, but like, is it good enough? The whole approach. Um, the aesthetics, you could say, is how something looks, feels, etc. Like, what associations do we have with it? Um, and we might say, okay, the political aesthetics is where that these things like the associations are related to politics. And of course, there's no clear distinction possible between, okay, is this related to politics or not? We might touch upon that, but I just want to say, okay, hey, this isn't about just like, okay, the design on election posters and how they look. Like, it's political aesthetics is not just that. So, my three main points today. The first one changed. I wouldn't say anymore because it didn't make much sense in the structure of the talk. That democratic economic planning, that's, I will simply say DEP going forward. Um, I simply will say, okay, it does not have good political aesthetics. There are already existing some, and I will go into that. The second point I will say is that this is a problem. Um, and the third, touching on that, what is the solution? So, story time. 2023 summer, I stumbled across this publishing wave of newspaper articles in big German newspapers um, on the re-emergence of the discourse on the economic planning. And I was quite surprised because they were not what you might have expected of like, okay, hey, some delusional leftist academics are talking about economic planning again. They want the GDR back, blah, 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 blah. But they were actually pretty neutral or sometimes even positive toward the re-emergence of these ideas. Um, that was quite surprising to me. Um, because I thought at that time, oh, are we already at the point we're now going to push these ideas into the German public? And yeah, and these weren't just like leftist niche newspapers. These were like big German newspapers, like that are mostly centrist, but sometimes even quite conservative. Um, so yeah, but then I noticed something, which is the pictures. You know, in articles, you always have like the picture on top of the article, and if you share something on social media, you only get to see like the title and the picture, and that's what 95% of people are only ever going to see. Or even if you have like a physical newspaper, like you scan through it, the title and the picture are the most impactful elements of these articles. So even if the articles were relatively positive, the pictures still had all of the like either they had like no associations at all, all of the old, like brought up all of the old problematic associations of planning, where kind of like, okay, the article can be as positive as it wants to be. It's basically it's basically done, given the picture. So I'm going to show you some of these. And so on the left, you have, I hope you can see it in the same way. On the left, you have like this super abstract picture that like, okay, hey, barely any associations. Like, okay, someone is drawing something up. Um, but on the bottom right, you see like these lines of the Trabis, the Trabant, um, the mass-produced car in the GDR that you had to wait like around 10 years for to get one. And even if okay, hey, the title comeback of the planned economy, um, it was pretty positive. The article are like pretty descriptive, and then you have the lines of the Travis, and it's like all of the old negative associations come up again. It's basically the same here. Like, okay, hey, something digital virtual reality, cool, but also not saying much. And on the right side, it's the building where the old Soviet planning ministry Gosplan was housed. So, but those are from newspapers. So what about so kind of like, let's say like from outside actors chosen, not from within the DEP discourse itself? So what are the aesthetics that the DEP discourse has produced itself, that it has chosen for itself? I would say you can categorize them roughly in three categories: graph aesthetics, big computer with optional Soviet imagery, and cybersyn. To give you an example, graph aesthetics, it's pretty self-explanatory. On the top left, you can see a graph for the planning of cotton production in the Soviet Union, if I'm not mistaken. And I think it is done by Otto Neurath, if I'm also not mistaken. And on the bottom right, you see like a graph of the model of negotiated coordination, one of the original planning models, like if, from like the early 90s by Pat Devine and Fruquit Adaman. And this specific graph was done by Rafael Ara. Um, Second one, big computer optional Soviet imagery. It's this. Um, and why that hashtag is there, like back in the day, like a couple of years ago, there was like this hashtag on social media, big computer mafia, which were basically like people who did meme content on around economic planning, and they were basically, oh, big computer will plan the economy. Um, of course, then like with a lot of references to Paul Cockshott and Alan Cottrell. Um, but yeah, you see where this is going, this kind of aesthetic. And third one, cybersyn. It's kind of self-explanatory. Um, yeah. Oh, now we do have some outliers that don't belong into any of these categories, and I want to give them some mentions here. So on the left, you can see the cover of an issue of Luxembourg, a journal published by the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation. Um, and this issue that was dedicated on the question of democratic economic planning. And on the right, it's an illustration in a popular magazine on philosophy for a little essay that Jan Gross wrote in, like, published in that magazine about freie Planwirtschaft. It's a um, free planned economy. It's a word play on like the free market, the free planned economy. Um, and then, very important, we have the aesthetics of the half-Earth socialism game, which are also very influenced by Neurath and his ideas on isotype, um, how to basically do data visualization. Yeah. Um, but these two are really like, these are one-offs, whereas the other three ones are more like, okay, they are identifiable tendencies. And this one is a screenshot from a recent from a recent article that's in Jacobin, which was an interview with Vivek Chibber. You see the title. It's pro-market socialism against economic planning. And the picture that's there is the, okay, hey, the planners in uh, walls that are decorated with wood, and they are kind of like, okay, you can say like the planners, and they planned upon these kinds of evocations swing there with it as well, like ideas of high modernism and its hubris, etc. So, I will come to critique these aesthetics in a second. But now the thesis stand, okay, these are not good aesthetics. Um, and then the question is like, okay, why? What's the explanation? What's the likely explanation of this? Um, it's basically today's planning discourse has its origins in academia. Like in the late 80s, early 90s, with like the Ur planning models, and then how that has been discussed and has developed itself. And it's like the origins, and there's still deep, deep ties to academia. In academia, the main medium simply is text. You might also say talks, but talks are at the end of the day like papers you read out loud. um, and so academics are not really trained and incentivized to engage beyond the medium of text. And theoretical argument is their main form of engagement. Um, I want to say this is not like, okay, all academics are evil. This is simply like, okay, this is a structural feature of the academic system that academics simply are not incentivized and not trained to engage beyond the medium of text that much. So, the second point with that I made in the beginning, that the EP doesn't have good political aesthetics is a problem. I will come to my specific critiques in a second again. And that is in comparison with academic discourse, public or popular political discourse, they work differently. And academics might model the public discourse like in the image of their own. But that's not representative of it. Think about like ideas of like ideal ideas of liberal democracy where the public sphere is basically one big seminar room. Um, so yeah, and academics might engage with the public, but they usually do so in like very limited, pre-selected forms of engagement, which simply are not representative of the larger public sphere or popular discourse. So, popular political discourse does not primarily work via rational argumentation, but via associations. And here again, that's like kind of like my thesis. I know it's not perfect, I know it's not nuanced, but I think to make the point of like, okay, there's a difference between academic discourse and popular political discourse, it's adequate enough. It gets to the heart of the matter. So associations are more important than rational argumentation. So associations, you can also call them vibes. Uh, Basically, if it isn't like intuitively clear already, it's okay, hey, you see, hear, or read X. What are the first three things you think about or you feel when you see something? Example. Degrowth. I think wide spread associations of degrowth that aren't like in the degrowth sphere itself, let's say that, are that like if people have heard about degrowth, it's the small scale, everything rule, forced consumption downgrade. Doesn't have to be exactly that, but you get the vibe. It's the vibe. The Great Reset, who remembers 2020? I will not go too much into this, but it's like live in the pod and eat the bugs. Whoever gets it, gets it. I can. It's the kind of like internet conspiracy meme, basically how this was taken up, but it's probably has been much, much more important in shaping political discourse rather than popular political discourse than like actual policy papers or something. So basically, the point is simply associations are not based on rationality, but they're based on what do you like. You have A, you have B. Do you intuitively connect them or not? And this connection is not based on rationality; it's something else. So uh, now that we have that out of the way, I can finally come to critiquing our existing planning aesthetics. Um, it's simply okay. Planning already still has problematic political associations, of course. Like USSR, in Germany very heavily, like the GDR, totalitarianism, scarcity, etc., etc., etc. Those are like the first few things that people think about when they hear planning, economic planning. Um, and our existing aesthetics aren't helping that. So we already have an uphill battle, even if though in some spheres these associations are a little bit loosening and there's a little bit more like space for possibility. Our aesthetics aren't helping that. With the graphs, they are cool as an informational tool, but they don't really have potential for like meaningful associations. The big computer and not ASMR, oh my fucking god, USSR imagery um, is like it has the same problems as the ones above. And then you might add, oh, like if you say, oh, big computer will plan the economy, then like ideas about like AI surveillance totalitarianism. Computer will tell you how much liters of water you have this week. Because computer calculated the economy optimally or something. No need for democracy. You get what I mean? I would say cyber sin is the least bad, but I think it still has problems. Mostly it's melancholic. It's like it's about this lost utopian chance. I mean, it's from the 70s, from the 70s, my God. Like it's like, oh, back in the day, there was this chance, there was really like this utopian possibility, but it's gone, and all we can do is kind of remember it and learn from it. But it's not future oriented. It's not like something that says, oh, we live in this world. We are the actors now today. What do we do? And what is our vision? Like it's looking backwards fundamentally. There's like a retro melancholia. So, important thing, this is a political strategic problem. This is not just some niche art issue that the academics can kind of like push upon like weird art people and say, okay, we do the real shit, you deal with this. No. This is if you take democratic economic planning serious as a political project, this is a problem for us all. To give you an example, the the associations of degrowth that I just talked about, they've become like hugely problematic and a huge hurdle for degrowth getting popular support and even openness for discussion, even in like policy and academic circles. I think we all know that. And so, like, something as stupid as, like, oh, these associations, the vibes. Oh, how could the vibes be problematic? Like, it matters. It matters. So degrowth always has to fight an uphill battle. It's like planning still. Um, and what's really important, once associations settle in, they're really difficult to change. Like we see this right now, like we still see this with planning. They are loosening up a little bit. So there is, as I said, like possibility for change. And that's very, very, very interesting. Um, yeah. But associations, vibes, like they frame every kind of engagement. And therefore they are basically more fundamental than rationality. And we don't want our aesthetics to make things worse for us. Um, if you send someone an article on democratic economic planning and it has the picture of like, I don't know, uh, Stalin with server rooms on there, maybe not such a good idea if they aren't already super deep into economic planning as a topic, but you see what I mean, you know? The associations prime you for how you engage with this thing. fundamentally the vibes matter. Mm. By the way, I cannot read the chat on the side. So if something is up, like something super, super important, um, just interrupt me. Otherwise, we have Q&A and discussion at the end. But yeah, this is wonderful Canva slop, as I said. Um, so, how do we get better DEP aesthetics? Um, I can only really talk about the how, not the what. What comes out at the end of this. Um, and I think really thinking, okay, what even is political aesthetics? How does it work? How do we relate to it is important for that. I would say there are at least like two logics that are pretty different from each other. First is a logic of advertisement, and second is a logic of, you might call it like engagement and empowerment. So the logic of advertisement is basically, it's advertisement. You want to sell something, you want to make something desirable, make it popular, and don't just think, okay, oh, advertisement, we are beyond that. Like, I mean, the logic of advertisement has propagated throughout our entire society, like with social media, with everything, really. Um, but just, I mean, that doesn't really matter for this one, but simply like, okay, hey, you want to make something desirable, make it popular, and therefore, like, okay, ideas around democratic economic planning. You can say soft power, like it falls into the realm of soft power. Um, just like just think about, okay, hey, how Japan redeemed its like public image after World War II. Like it became from, oh, okay, genocidal and imperialist and fascist to, oh, they make cool electronics, are the future, and anime and kawaii. Um, and people want to travel there. Um, that's the logic of soft power. You advertise indirectly something with your own output, with your own cultural output. You might say to a certain extent the recent phenomenon of like China maxing falls into this category. It's uh, it's very interesting, by the way, that like in the whole China maxing thing, um, sometimes like, oh, hey, this is what our country would look like, or this is what a country looks like that has economic planning, and then they do like the cool edits of like Chongqing or Shenzhen or something. I just find it funny, but we won't go deeper into that. Um, so, logic of advertisement, not in the big grand scale of soft power, but for more like academics, NGO people. What's the case of that? It's you put a certain picture in the slides of your talk to make the ideas more appealing, and not be like me and have black text on white background. Um, you put a nice picture in your policy brief. You use certain aesthetics for your book cover, your organization's Instagram post, etc. All of that is a one-directional relation. You have, let's say, DEP research on one side. You have like popular associations or opinion on the other side, and kind of like, okay, aesthetics are the thing which is supposed to influence them from one side to the other. That's the logic of advertisement. Okay, I hope you had a chance to read this. Um, this is a piece of mine that I've exhibited, and I think it pretty much nails down this logic pretty well, pretty brutally. Um, at the same time, it tries to like subvert it a little bit, or thinks about, okay, hey, How could such subversion look like within the logic of advertisement, um, while wanting to transcend the logic of advertisement? But yeah. Um, what's important here is that the logic of advertisement is an integral part and of aesthetics. And probably you can say like, okay, hey, any kind of aesthetics. Um, like even the most fringe art probably has like a certain makes something desirable, you know? um, and this is something that cannot be ignored. Like it's always there, you always gotta deal with it. Um, but I would say political aesthetics is not reducible to it or should not be reduced to it and should we should at least look a little bit beyond purely this logic. And that's the logic of engagement or empowerment. Um, so basically, how do people engage with ideas around DEP? Texts, talks, podcasts, etc. Those are kind of like the classic media. So the question is oh, like first, why not through more experiential media? Media that explores associations rather than purely working on a cognitive basis of like I need to understand like I can experience something versus I need to read something and understand concepts. And examples could be like pictures, images, film, music, installations. And I would say it makes sense to think about all of these media, also texts, talks, podcasts, etc., as a form of like you have an idea, and then the medium gives the idea a form. That's like complexity reduction. And this medium then enables a certain form of engagement and access, but also limits it. And there's no one perfect medium, probably. But every medium gives you like a different possible angle of engagement and of access. Um, yeah. Um, and having like these other avenues of engagement, because they open access up to non-academics who are trained in like reading all of these hyper difficult texts and are interested in that. Um, Opening that up might also uncover academic blind spots. Like the academic research discourse is very good at shutting itself off from questions and contributions outside of it. It's a very self-selective dynamic. And as soon as you have like, okay, other people participating in this discourse that do have not gone through this academic training, they might have like a completely different perspective, but very, very valuable contributions to a discourse and might like bring attention to unexplored questions and problems. So the goal of the logic of engagement and empowerment would basically be to establish a feedback loop between popular associations and opinions. As I said, like it's associations, experience based probably, and research on DEP, and then widen the discourse beyond academia. Um, as you can see, the second arrow at the bottom does not have text on it. It's basically because I simply do not know yet how kind of like popular associations and opinion could feed back into DEP research. Um, that's kind of like an open question that we might want to take with us here. But the goal would be to achieve this feedback loop and to think about aesthetics as enabling rather than simply, oh, here is find this desirable. It's more like to empower someone to make up their own mind. So three, coming back to like my original 3 points. What is the solution? I don't have one. um, at least not like the oh, all of these aesthetics are bad. Here's the one that's good. Like no, I don't have that. Um, and I think we shouldn't immediately rush to try to fill in this vacuum. Like I think that's misinformed. Um, I have more like preliminary questions, methodological questions that could inform or should inform how we think about better political aesthetics for DEP. Um, I think these logics of advertisement and of empowerment engagement is like belong to that. Um, but I think we should also question the one coherent aesthetic idea. Um, I'm not entirely sure about it. Like I haven't made up my mind completely, but we should definitely question if that like having one coherent aesthetic is A, desirable, and B, if that's even possible given the structure of the current DEP discourse. Um, A, is it desirable? Is basically the point of okay, once associations are settled, it's very difficult to change them. So if you would go all in on one specific aesthetic, that might seem very, very risky in terms of, okay, when that aesthetic catches on, it's what will always be associated with the idea of democratic economic planning. And I think the likelihood that, okay, the associations that this will conjure up, that this will evoke, are likely gonna be like rather problematic and strategically problematic than beneficial, especially if we haven't engaged deeply before with like these questions of political aesthetics. Um, then the point, I think it's also very important to think about the dynamics of propagation of like, okay, how does an aesthetic, how are they popular, how are they propagated in like kind of like a cultural zeitgeist? What are the medium? Um, who are the big Instagram accounts who are going to push something? Who are the big institutional players? Where's influence? Um, and then the question is also like, okay, hey, and maybe there will be a tendency to have one dominant democratic economic planning aesthetics, but that will simply emerge, and yeah, that could also be very much the case. Um, and B, um, is it even possible to achieve one of the like one coherent dominant planning aesthetic with the given network structure? Like we do not have one overarching unitary coordinate. Sorry, we do not have overarching unitary coordination. We don't just like party style. We don't just like gather everyone and then say, "Oh, we are agreeing now to this aesthetic." Deliberate on it, then make a democratic decision, and then everybody has to follow that. That's simply not what we have. And so the question of like, okay, is something like a unitary aesthetic even like possible to control or something? Also a big question. So, but like the fundamental point, of course, is to, okay, hey, let's create positive associations of democratic economic planning rather than the ones. At least, I think democratic economic planning is because it's quite a neutral word and it's not democratically planned economy. I think there's a big difference in the vibes and in the associations. So we did some good branding there. Um, I think it's a little bit more open. Um, but with these positive, I'm just looking at the timer. Um, with with these positive associations, we should always remember that DEP is a means to an end. It's not like, oh my God, I like politics and I like economics so much, therefore I engage with this stuff. It's no. I want to have a good life, a better life. I want something like freedom. It's like more like a little bit more ill-defined feelings, aspirations, and you think, okay, DEP is a means to end, is the means to achieve that. And I think in our associations that we should create, we should focus a little bit more on these abstract, evocative things, rather than focus on like the economic, like displaying the economic architecture of something. Um, I think what we really should do is connecting the political and the personal. And with the means ends relationship, that's already in there a little bit. So yeah, like connecting the political and the personal, the right wing does this really, really well. They basically say, okay, this is the world. This is why you suffer. This is why your life is shit. Um, this is who or what is at fault. This needs to be fixed. Then you can achieve your dreams and live a good life again. And that's kind of like simply the narrative structure that's there. I won't go into okay what they fill like the blanks what they fill that in with because like of course I don't agree with that. But like in terms of okay, hey, that's kind of like the overall structure. It's a narrative, it's like a cognitive map of the world, of your relationship to the world, of what's wrong. Um, and fundamental is this like linking of like really personal, existential aspirations, feelings, fear, anxiety with something political. And it's an association. And we have to create this. And I think we can learn quite a lot from how the right wing does that. As I said, not with the content, but in terms of like, okay, hey, the general methodology structure. Let me see. I'm already talking like quite a bit. Okay. Um, yeah. I'm gonna come to an end, but it's like my last point, also like a little bit of an I think utopian aesthetics, like if we think about okay, creating positive associations or what could be utopian political aesthetics, I think they're often too caught up in what I would call naturalistic representation. Um, I simply mean by that, okay, a naturalistic representation is basically a what if scenario. They're mostly visual, and it's basically a snapshot of how a certain world would look like. Like you see this especially with like the solar punk aesthetic. This is a good example here, like kind of like the most famous solar punk ad for a dairy company. It's the funny shit. Um, so, whereas like abstract representation, I would say is based on associations, it's based on feelings, it's evocative, it's something less graspable. Um, and like primary mediums for that are like, I would say like the primary medium is probably music. Um, but even like film, like a film can have a certain mood and it's not about think about I don't know if you've ever watched Neon Genesis Evangelion, but like Neon Genesis Evangelion isn't about giant robots. It's about existential stuff. um yeah. Or yeah. Uh then or like if you've ever watched Miami Vice, like the 2006 Michael Mann movie, like it's about the mood, the vibe, something what it evokes. Um And I would also say even naturalistic representation in order to be like in order for something for it to depict something desirable, it has to depends on abstract representation. Like it has to still be like the question is like, okay, what makes this feel desirable? And it's the vibe. You see this and you're kind of like, yeah, this feels nice. This feels desirable. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of objects, you know? They don't mean anything to you. Um, and that's also one of my kind of favorite thing, mood board aesthetics and digital collages. Um, with the abstract representation, abstract associations, I will just show two of them here, two of the edits. Um, yeah, and the most important point of this whole conversation, of this whole talk, is like think about political aesthetics as integral to political strategy. It's not just some side project. That's yeah. Honorable mentions really quickly because I couldn't get into speculative design, even though it's very, very related to here. I said like, okay, hey, experiential access, installation, blah blah blah. You could say like, okay, speculative design fits really well into this. Honorable mention to Rafael Ara, and like one of his recent INDEP online talks goes into his work on that really well. And Alex Gerber, her, oh, I wrote this wrong. Uh, her installation Lemonade 50 Cent. Um, yeah, yes. And I'm finally done, and we can end the recording.